Hello, and welcome to Teaching in Immersive Environments. This presentation is about the design and implementation of creating learning content for immersive learning. I'm Amelia Ijiri, an instructor at the Kyoto Institute of Technology. I've been interested in the practical side of instructional design for augmented, virtual, mixed, and extended reality since 2016. Today's talk is about the work I've done in collaboration with Victory XR teaching the Japanese language for 4 weeks in a head-mounted device in the fall of 2020. Today's talk will start with a background: what is immersive learning, how it's important for VR education, what we are talking about when we say the metaverse, before going into some instructional design benefits of VR, including the environments and assets. I'll briefly tell you about my case study and share with you student feedback before going into the drawbacks and future directions of teaching in virtual reality. Virtual reality allows us to interact and inhabit worlds in a way that feels more compelling than any other technology previously devised, and is psychologically more powerful than any medium ever invented, and is poised to dramatically transform our lives. These are the words of VR researcher Dr. Bailenson at the Stanford Labs. What VR is it creates a digitally simulated world, sometimes referred to as the metaverse. And the COVID-19 pandemic brought about more digital technologies into our lives and an increased interest in VR for educational purposes. As educators adopt new and emergent technologies to close the lag between our practices and theories for learning and teaching second language in a digital era, the study of digital language learning emerged as an educational practice and a field of scientific study. This talk will talk about the benefits of learning in an immersive environment and a practical guide for implementing VR into a second language learning context. Again, to quote Dr. Bailenson, unlike adding 3D to movies or color to TVs, VR is an entirely new medium with its own characteristics and psychological effects. Last year, social media giant Facebook announced its intention to build these virtual worlds and change the Facebook name to Meta.
It is time for us to adopt a new company brand to encompass
This is important because Meta has 2.9 million monthly active users, making it the largest country in the world and almost 500 million less than the 5 most populous countries combined: China, India, the United States, Indonesia, and Pakistan. In my conclusion today, we're going to talk about some of the concerns with the biometrics sharing and harvesting of the VR experience. But today, before we get into that, I want to tell you about how to design for VR. One is to consider VR's benefit, or what practitioners call affordances for language learning. These features make the context conducive to the acquisition of language by cognitive, social, and affective dimensions. In fact, it enables first language learning in a second language environment, using interaction and socially relative context in multimodal and multisensory information. And the difference is someone viewing a digital world on their phone versus having an avatar represent them and act for them in a digital world. Virtual reality environments allow learners to see, point to, pick up, and move objects and simulate the corresponding actions, which enable a childlike learning process. Educators, researchers, and corporations consider the best practices for immersive learning in VR. Research supports claims of enhanced learning and increased motivation and engagement. How can VR be harnessed to deliver immersive learning experiences? If we are to inhabit new worlds, how should we contextualize them? How can VR be explored for positive, lasting, transformative experiences? This talk considers how educators can create these meaningful learning experiences. The cognitive effect model of immersive learning is a proposed research-based theoretical framework for learning in immersive environments. Camille identifies presence, the feeling of being there, and agency, the feeling of generating and controlling actions to influence events, as the two general psychological affordances of learning in immersive virtual reality. Immersive virtual reality-based lessons lead to learning outcomes including increased interest, motivation, self-efficiency, embodiment, cognitive load, and self-regulation. I was curious about teaching a language in virtual reality, and in August 2021, I received a grant from Victory XR to design and teach live 30-minute Japanese lessons. My interest was to how language could fit into this immersive landscape. From an instructional designer perspective, language students can act and do things differently in VR. So the evolution of teaching and new ideas about learning must be built into the lessons and conceptualized differently. So today I'm going to tell you about the benefits and how to design for virtual reality on two basic ideas: the environment to consider and the assets. This is a custom environment for studying the Japanese language. While hotel lobbies, restaurants, and airports would provide good backgrounds for language practice, Victory XR wanted someplace cultural where students would be able to experience an entirely new experience, along with imaginary classroom, this imaginary classroom with cultural references in manga and anime. In this environment, students as avatars can walk around and interact with items. This is a different environment called a virtual field trip. A virtual field trip is experienced by entering a portal into a blank virtual room. Then a pre-recorded 360 video is played, filling the entire field of vision. Unlike a virtual classroom where students can interact with objects, the video is projected around students and the avatar is unable to interact or influence the video. VR also offers conventional classroom lectures, like the ability to show PowerPoints or Google Slides on a projection screen, watch 2D videos, or sit down. But the feeling of being there and the ability to influence events that lead to emotionally learning is what really what makes learning in virtual reality special. Here is a courtroom that could be used for a literature study of how to kill a mockingbird. The platform Engage has paid and free environments. For the second part of my talk, I'll be discussing the other affordance of VR, its interactivity in creating 3D objects, or what are called assets. These 3D objects gave me a great deal of classroom material to work with for teaching vocabulary and grammar. 3D objects are stored in a shared library. At a click of a button, I had 3D objects to enlarge, reduce, position, create, or delete. The students could also create hand-drawn objects using a 3D pen. Currently, the bulk of Victory XR educational products are science-based. Autonomy, microbiology, and oceanography. These work well in VR because unlike traditional classrooms, for example, the 3D model of a heart can be enlarged enough for a student to walk through, or small enough that they can be passed around. Dissection, human, frog, pig, etc., underwater exploration, and room-sized DNA modules are all perfectly suited for a VR classroom and quite difficult to manage in a traditional classroom. The next best thing to a real experience is a VR experience. VR pedagogy enables more student participation and interactive learning. My students were very interested and motivated by the VR lessons. Perhaps the ability to engage with the environment, or in the case of a virtual field trip, focus their attention on something seen in the video, gave them the context for learning the language. For them, being immersed in a 360 video with the ability to stop the video and ask appropriate and timely questions was beneficial to providing real-life, authentic context to the language. We also talked about entering a convenience store together in future lessons and having role plays. Having overcome the learning curve of being in virtual reality, our class was excited about the possibilities of going together to different places where we could practice some useful phrases while role playing. In a virtual field trip that I showed in class that was recorded in 2020, it included a COVID-19 protest at a Tokyo train station, which the students found surprising, interesting, and relevant. So now we've reached the final part of my presentation to discuss some drawbacks and future directions. In conclusion, as broad as the frontier is for VR, so is its potential for misuse. Right now, Meta, formerly known as Facebook, is requiring login to use their commercial mass-marketed $299 headset, the Oculus Quest 2. Once users are inside the headset, biometric data, for example, eye movement and mannerisms, are calibrated to your body. A big data deluge could be harvested and sold to advertisers. It is one thing to enter a password, quite another to have a tech company with all your biometric data for harvesting. Although this solution is one that is being currently worked on and discussed in different countries, I can give you two ideas on how to integrate a more budget-friendly VR into your classroom. So one solution would to be having a VR learning station as part of a larger lesson plan. This would be 5 or 6 headsets that students could enter for the immersive part of a learning experience. Another suggestion would be using web VR, also called browser-based or desktop VR. Web VR lessens the immersion, but learners report less motion sickness and eye strain than viewing in head-mounted gear. Most platforms, such as Engage or Frame, can offer a experience whether you're in a headset or viewing from your desktop computer. How immersive learning will redefine instruction for learning and educators is poised to be one of the pivotal pedagogical discussions of the decade. Thank you very much for your time today.